Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 26 series, Rescue the Rockies. And our season is over here, a 58 and 104 record, 40 games behind last place finish in the National League West, and the worst record in all of baseball here in the 2025 season. So hopefully there is nowhere to go but up for these Rockies as we start moving through the playoffs and ultimately to our first offseason with the team, in which we can hopefully start making some strides on improving this team that ranked 9th in the National League in runs scored this year and 15th dead last in runs allowed. Definitely going to be a big challenge to improve on this pitching staff. Take a quick look at what the roster looks like here right now. Ryan Feltner had a shockingly good year for us, an 11-6 record with a 3.70 earned run average and a 3.1 WAR. He actually led the National League with a 58.1% quality start percentage, which honestly seems like a fairly low number to have led the league. So he did incredibly well for us this year, despite pitching half of his games in Coors Field. When we look at his pitching ratings, there is certainly nothing about him that suggests he should be way over 500 on a team that had a winning percentage well below 400. But the season worked out pretty well for him, set to make $4.4 million next year. Given his success this year and how bad most of the rest of our pitching staff was, we probably bring him back, even though on paper he doesn't necessarily look incredible. 24-year-old Bradley Blaylock had more of a typical season for a Rockies starter this year. 4-14 with an earned run average over 8. He was about a win and a half below replacement. Below average stuff, below average movement, below average control, and fly ball tendencies. Probably isn't going to play pretty well in Coors. The one benefit we have with him is that he's young and cheap. Would think that, unfortunately, he'll still probably be competing for a spot in our rotation next year. Gabriel Hughes brought him up when he was 23. He turned 24 a little over a month ago. 1-7 record in the majors with a 5.27 ERA, almost a win below replacement. Below average stuff, below average movement, average-ish control. Another guy who, since he's young and cheap, will likely be competing for a spot in the rotation, or at least on the roster going forward, but likely not someone we're going to be building around for the long term. Picked up Aaron Ashby in a trade with the Brewers. Figured we would take a flyer on an extreme ground ball pitcher with average stuff, slightly above average movement, but well below average control. And since joining us, he was 4-5 with an ERA of over 5. The lack of control definitely was a huge issue, with 43 walks in just 64 and a third innings. That said, his FIP minus was 91, and he was 1.1 wins above replacement. So once again, another guy who will be competing for a spot with us next year, simply because we don't have a lot of pitchers. And Carson Palmquist, 24-year-old, brought him up this year, also 5-5 with a 4.23 ERA for the Rockies. Definitely one of our more successful pitchers. Average stuff, the movement and control, both a little bit of below average. Extreme flying ball tendencies, doesn't throw pretty hard, and his home runs allowed is below average. So question his long-term level of success. Thinking about the rotation, would love if Feltner continues to perform really well. But I don't know how many of these guys are in our medium to long-term plans, even though several may be back next year. Picked up Chris Martin in a trade with Texas, and as some of you suggested in a response to our previous episode, we really should have just flipped him. I just wasn't thinking when we picked him up on July 26th, but there was no reason for us to have a 39-year-old pitcher who's pretty good on our team, and we probably could have gotten something useful for him. He was 2-1 with 10 saves and a sub-3 ERA in his limited time in Colorado, but he is headed to free agency and looking for $13.2 million a year over 3 years heading into the season when he'll turn 40. So unlikely that he is in our future. Righty Jake Bird, 3-3 with a 4.10 ERA, was reasonably effective for us out of the pen, but the soon-to-be 30-year-old, probably not a big part of our long-term plans, set to be making about $1.5 million next year in his first arbitration-eligible season. Seth Halverson, 25-year-old, 3-6 with a 3.71 earned run average. Did give up 9 homers in just 77 2/3 innings, but like many of our relievers, he was actually decent. Throws in the triple digits, still making the major league minimum. Likely will be back in the bullpen next year. Righty Diego Castillo, 1-1 with a 2.43 ERA, but another guy whose pitching profile is certainly not impressive. Walked 20 batters in 40 2/3 innings. Given where we think his control is, it's possible that number could be worse going forward. He'll turn 32 this offseason, headed into arbitration, going to make a bit more than $1.5 million. Probably will not be back with us next year as we start turning over some of the older players. Angel Chivili was our lone all-star this year, 4-2 record with a 3.18 ERA. 23-year-old, throws in the high 90s, below average stuff, but we think his movement can be average and his control could be a bit above average. Given that he's making the major league minimum, he will likely be back in our pen next year. We brought up Josan Mendez in September. He pitched to a 4.50 ERA over 6 innings pitched. Another youngster, relative youngster at 25 years old, should be competing for a spot in the bullpen next year. Jaden Hill, we've got bigger hopes for him, but he had a 6.75 ERA over 9 games in a small sample size in Colorado this year. One of these guys who's going to be 26 soon, who we still think there's a lot of untapped potential, but at least my experience with the OOTP 26 has been once some of these pitchers get into their mid to late 20s, even if they have a fair amount of theoretical untapped potential, they definitely don't always realize it. Elvis Peguero, a lefty with extreme ground ball tendencies, we picked up in that trade with Milwaukee, where we also got Ashby. Stuff and control, both below average, but decent movement on his pitches. He was fine, an ERA of close to 5 over 22 innings pitched, slightly above replacement level. Likely will be competing for a spot as a righty out of our bullpen next year. Victor Vodnik, September call-up, and he was with us earlier in the year before I took over the team. 3.24 ERA over 16 2/3 innings at the major league level. Another guy who will likely be competing for a spot on the team, given that he's got ground ball tendencies and he throws close to triple digits. Scott Alexander was our lone lefty out of the pen for much of this season. Certainly going to be looking for another lefty, at least one, to join him in the bullpen next year. He's also set to be a free agent, so 36 years old. Probably won't bring him back. He did have a 3.61 ERA over 52 1/3 innings, but he gave up 8 dingers despite his extreme ground ball tendencies. Stuff is below average, and as I noted, he's 36 years old. Not looking for crazy money at $1.8 million, but in a perfect world, I would love to get younger and better as far as the lefty arms we have out of the pen. So I can't say there's anyone on this team that we're necessarily going to be building this pitching staff around. I'd say in a perfect world, 3 or 4 years from now, none of these pitchers are either part of our rotation or our bullpen, but it's going to probably take us a while to get to the point where we move on from most of these guys. So wouldn't be surprised to see many of these names back with us in 2026. And before we move on to take a look at our position players who were somewhat more productive than our pitchers, we'll see who's going to be moving on from the best of 3 wildcard series. And we're going to have some interesting divisional series here in 2025. AL Central matchup between the Tigers and the Twins, the Yankees and the Astros, who have plenty of playoff history over the past almost decade. NL East matchup between the Phillies and the Braves. Braves taking out the mighty Dodgers, and the Reds will be facing off against the Padres in the other National League Division Series. Turning back to our Rockies and our everyday players, and although we weren't a great team and 9th in the National League in runs scored, playing half your games in cores is definitely not impressive. I do feel like there are guys here who could be parts of our future, so don't mind if we try building around a few of these guys going forward. Hunter Goodman is listed as a catcher, but honestly he moved into more of a DH role once we brought Drew Romo back. Pretty effective offensive season for the 25-year-old. Hit 280, 27 homers, and 97 ribbies. 123 WRC plus and a 3.2 WAR. Certainly has a bat that we will likely be building around for the future. Set to make the major league minimum next year. Check in quickly on an extension in 8 years. He's looking for about $17.5 million a year. So I think he might be a guy that we just let play through his minimum years and his arbitration years to see what he ultimately becomes in his late 20s. Really like the bat, but don't really want to be playing him at catcher, and he's not particularly adept at first base, left, or right field. So he ultimately be maybe mostly a DH type of guy. You know, if he keeps putting up a 123 WRC plus, that's fine. Certainly someone who will be with us next year most likely, unless someone blows us away with a trade offer. But his defensive limitations are a bit of a concern if I really want to build this team up with good pitching and good defense over time. Drew Romo does give us that really good defense behind the plate, and hit 238 this year with 4 homers and 28 ribbies and 265 at-bats after we brought him back up. Only a 65 WRC plus, but still was a win and a half above replacement level. Brings that captain personality into the clubhouse. Despite his offensive limitations, with the really good defense and our very weak pitching staff, think it makes sense to try to help them to the extent we can with a catcher who is very talented at blocking and framing and also has a well above average arm. Turning to our infielders, Vinny Pasquantino, picked him up in a trade with Kansas City, and he was pretty productive for us in Colorado. 272 average, 17 homers and 48 ribbies and 298 at-bats, 131 WRC plus and a 1.7 WAR. He is a guy who is headed to arbitration, going to make about $3.5 million. If we think about a longer-term contract for him, $14 million average for the final years of the contract, really looking more for an 11-year kind of average over 8 years. Kind of view him similar to the way I view Goodman. Really like their bats, but they both have defensive limitations. Probably not someone we're necessarily going to make a long-term commitment to. Speaking of guys we're not going to make a long-term commitment to, Nick Gordon was a minor league free agent signing back in mid-May after we took this team over. Spent a good chunk of the year with us at the major league team as a utility infielder, hit 240 and 104 at-bats. Good influence in the clubhouse, a guy who can play a number of positions, second base as well as some outfield spots, but probably as a guy who's going to be 30 years old in just a few days, not going to be back with us next year. Eggy Rosario, picked him up in a trade with the Padres, and he proved to be a bit of a mirage. We thought that his offensive ratings looked pretty solid, but he hit just 234 with 9 homers and 31 ribbies and 322 at-bats. 86 WRC plus was below replacement level. Would think that with his bat looking decent on paper, his speed looking decent on paper, his defense looking decent on paper, and he can play a number of positions, that he'll be back with us next year. But after starting 88 games after we picked him up, would love for him to be in more of a true utility role next year. A couple guys who may help push Rosario into more of a utility role. Dale Amador spent time in AAA where he hit 300 this year. Unfortunately, he hit just a $186 in 188 major league at-bats. Another guy who's versatile and respectable is an infield defender. We think there's definitely still room for him to improve. Only 22 years old. Would have to think we might be looking for a development lab spot for him this offseason so he can hopefully ultimately boost his offense, improve on that 40 WRC plus and below replacement level type performance that he put up for us in the majors. Cole Carrig, another youngster, 23 years old, another guy who's very versatile defensively, excellent speed, kind of a borderline major league bat. Did hit 259 in 147 at-bats at the major league level. 86 WRC plus was above replacement level. He's making the major league minimum as a guy who was a rookie this year, so would certainly expect him to be competing for a spot on the team next year, possibly in the starting lineup. Ryan McMahon's an interesting one at this point. He is now our highest paid player, unlike some of the more experienced guys that we dealt away. He is still a useful major leaguer, but he definitely had an injury-plagued down year. Hit just 214 with 18 homers and 439 at-bats, 93 WRC plus and a 1.2 WAR. Set to make $16 million next year. He is a veteran, but we do have, as we've talked about, some young infielders who look promising. I can't imagine there's going to be a huge bid for McMahon out there, but I think with his skill set, his salary, the defense he brings, he's definitely a guy who we could trade away if we decided that we wanted to. Last but hopefully not least among the infielders, Ezequiel Tovar, Gold Glove winner a year ago, still a very impressive defensive profile, has some speed. The bat looks decent except for the fact that he just does not draw many walks. Only hit 228 this year with 11 homers and 52 ribbies and 368 at-bats. Walked just 18 times, so his on-base percentage was a sickly 268. 70 WRC plus, still put up a 1.3 WAR thanks to his good defense, zone rating and defensive efficiency, both above average to well above average as a shortstop. And Tovar is a guy that the Rockies had also signed to a long-term extension, taking him through the rest of his arbitration years and then some free agent years. Next few years, making $5.2 million, $8.2 million, certainly reasonable. When he starts getting into his late 20s, those numbers will get higher. I think he's likely back with us next year. We really need that solid defense in the middle of the infield. But we're definitely going to have some decisions to make with a lot of these guys. Rosario, Amador, and Carrig, would hope that among those three. We maybe find one guy, two if we're lucky, who we can build around over the medium term. Talked about McMahon, might look to deal him. Tovar probably back just to stabilize shortstop defensively as we try to build this team. And Gordon almost certainly gone. Moving on to the outfielders, Michael Toglia, who was our first baseman before we brought Vinny on board, hit just .210 with 20 homers and 56 ribbies and over 500 at-bats. So a 75 WRC plus, and he was below replacement level on the year. Decent defensive first baseman, competent corner outfielder. Hopefully the switch hitter is more productive offensively next year. Still making the major league minimum next year, so he'll probably be back with us, but certainly hoping for more offense if he's going to stick with us for the long term. Picked up Miguel Vargas in one of our trades with the White Sox, and he was an absolute train wreck. Hit just $163 with only one home run in 80 at-bats. 40 WRC plus, was below replacement level. His BABIP was below 200, so certainly an argument that maybe he got very unlucky. You would think a line drive hitter in Coors Field would do decently, but did not see that on the field from Vargas this year. He's a guy who still will be making the major league minimum next year, though, so similar to Toglia, probably in the mix to be in our outfield, along with Jordan Beck, who was productive in 149 major league at-bats, hitting .289 with a ridiculous 145 WRC plus, had 23 extra base hits in those 149 at-bats, including 9 home runs. He is another guy who's making the major league minimum and will certainly be competing for a spot in the outfield next year. Similarly, the center fielder Brenton Doyle, two-time Gold Glove winner, hit .261 for us this year, 19 homers, 25 stolen bases, close to a league average offensive player, and put up a 3.0 WAR given his very good defense in center field. Zone rating an outstanding 10.1, and his defensive efficiency also well above average. So if he can continue putting up WRC pluses in the 90s or higher, pretty useful player for us to have around. Set to make almost $3 million in his first arbitration-eligible season, so I don't know whether he'll be with us for the long term, but likely will be back next year. So the first 4 outfielders we've talked about are all guys who are probably in the mix to be on the team next year. These last 2, not so sure. Sean Bouchard, pretty decent profile for a 29-year-old. Okay defensively, decent speed, but he hit only .213 in 268 at-bats for us. 86 WRC plus. He was below replacement level. Set to make $1.5 million next year, so he's a little more expensive than the number of outfielders we have who are going to be making the major league minimum. Certainly can afford him, but is the oldest guy among these outfielders and one who didn't have a particularly productive season. Can't imagine he's going to have a ton of value in the trade market, but if we could even just get a pitcher to take a flyer on for him, could be a guy that we move on from. Last but not least, Luis Robert Jr. He was very productive for us in 222 at-bats after we picked him up from the White Sox. 13 homers, 43 ribbies, successful on 9 out of 10 stolen base attempts, batted .297 with an .880 OPS, 130 WRC plus, and a 2.2 WAR. We also threw him out into right field and had him learn how to play right field at the major league level, since we do have a pretty good defensive center fielder in addition to him. So we did, as we talked about, get the White Sox to retain a good chunk of his contract. So he's only going to cost us $6 million next year. I would think at that number, given how productive he was for us, we either bring him back or if there's some demand for him in a trade coming off of this resurgent season for Luis Robert Jr., where he kind of performed the way the White Sox were hoping he might 4 or 5 years ago when they signed him to that long extension. I think he's either with us, or if someone is willing to give us something interesting in return for him in a trade, maybe we trade him away, given that that team option for $20 million a year from now is still applicable, and the White Sox didn't retain any of that. Obviously, would think that he's likely just a 1-year member of the Rockies, even if we do bring him back next season. And with the everyday players now reviewed, we'll turn our attention to the division series and see who's going to be moving on to the 2 league championship series here in 2025. And before we find out who won those series, a couple of posted players from the Korean baseball organization. 28-year-old center fielder Ji-hoon Choi. Decent defensively, decent speed. Don't think he really has a major league bat, and he's coming off of a ruptured Achilles, so certainly don't think we have any interest in spending a $15 million posting fee on him. Also, third baseman Si-hwan No. Looks like a competentish, potentially major league bat at the age of 24 with a decent glove for a third baseman. Very productive last year in the KBO, 296 average, 30 homers and 106 ribbies, but doesn't look like it's going to translate into being a particularly effective major league player. So my inclination would be to not chase either of those players given their posting fees. And your American League Championship Series will feature the Detroit Tigers, who swept the Minnesota Twins, against the New York Yankees, who came back from a 2-1 deficit to hold off the Astros in 5. The Phillies beat the Braves in 5 to move on to the NLCS, and they will be facing your Cincinnati Reds, who, after taking out the Cardinals 2-1, took out the Padres 3-1 in the divisional series. And before finding out who's going to move on to the World Series, we'll check in on our very unimpressive minor league system that ranks 22nd in the majors. Top prospect is first baseman Charlie Condon, number 30 overall. Ended up hitting .248 with 11 homers and 37 ribbies in 226 at-bats after we promoted him to Double-A. Was a busy year for him. Started out in Single-A, moved into High A ball where he was pretty effective. Ended up with a 91 WRC plus and was basically a replacement level player in Double-A. But if we can have some success with him in the development lab this year, we still think that every aspect of his bat could end up being a little bit above average to well above average. Don't know where we're ultimately going to play him defensively. As I noted, we were working him out at first base given his 6'6" size and decent offensive ratings, or decent defensive ratings for a first baseman. Honestly, that 6'6" combination with those ratings is a potential gold glove first baseman, and he also looks like he could be a competent-ish corner outfielder for us. So the big question with Mr. Condon is, can we get the bat to continue developing? Braden Nett, who we picked up in a trade with the Padres, split the year for us between Double-A Hartford and Triple-A Albuquerque, 1-2 with a 7.67 earned run average in Triple-A. So he still has a long way to go. Doesn't look like he's ever going to be an ace, but particularly given how bad some of our starting rotation pitchers looked, he could be competing for a prominent spot in our rotation in the not too distant future. Robert Calaz, 19-year-old, hit .235, basically was a league average player in A-ball. Pretty impressive to be, having part of his second season in A-ball as a teenager. Hopefully he'll look ready for high A when we get to the start of next season. Starting pitcher Chris McMahon, 1-3 with a 4.18 ERA in AAA after we moved him up from AA. Another guy who looks like he could be a usable back of the rotation type of arm, but ultimately to have the type of success we hope to in Colorado, we're going to need more than usable back of the rotation type of arms. McMahon also at 26. Can't really say that he's a big-time prospect. Center fielder Benny Montgomery, 23-year-old who hit 255 in 455 at-bats in AA, was a below-average offensive player, but he did steal 20 bases in 23 attempts and put up a WAR of close to 3. Pretty solid defensive player with a high work ethic. Question for him is whether he's really going to be able to consistently produce offensively against major league pitching. We'll highlight a couple of other key prospects in the organization. Sean Sullivan is a guy that I'm hoping we have some luck with development-wise. Left-handed pitcher, another guy who looks like he could be a useful arm. Don't love the extreme fly ball tendencies for Coors. Started the year in A-ball. We promoted him to AA. And then he ultimately made it up to AAA, where he was 0-2 with a ridiculous 13.81 ERA. He was absolutely destroyed at that level. 33 hits allowed, including 7 home runs in just 14 and a third innings. So he was absolutely wrecked at AAA, but hopeful that he could ultimately become a useful player for us. And the only one of our draft picks this year that saw any material time in the minors was our 4th overall pick, Jamie Arnold out of Florida State. He still looks like his stuff, movement, and control could end up all a bit above average. Potential for a nice 4-pitch arsenal. Don't like some of his personality traits. Going to be very important to get him in the development lab this year. With those ratings, if he reaches his full potential, he would be the best pitcher on our pitching staff. So the hope is that in a couple of years, the left-hander might be ready for the majors. He was 0-1 with a 4.32 ERA and 6 starts in A-ball. We decided to push him a little bit and sent him up to high A towards the end of the year, where he was also 0-1 with an ERA of over 6. I think the best thing we can say about him is that he struck out over 15 batters per 9 innings in A-ball and over 14 batters per 9 innings in high A-ball. And he was above replacement level at both levels. FIP minuses better than average and pretty strong Sierras at both levels. So although the numbers aren't particularly impressive, there's reason to think that there's still some potential here. Going to be critical for us to have some success with him in the development lab this offseason and hopefully for the next few off-seasons. And with that, let's find out who's going to be in the World Series here in 2025. And before we get to the World Series, we're going to take a look at a high-level overview of the international amateur free agent class. Looks like there is some incredible talent available. Unfortunately, since it's the first year of the playthrough, we're going to have the same $4.75 million to spend as every other team, even though the Rockies have been awful for close to a decade and not spending a ton of money. But there are some very interesting prospects out there. Center fielder Luis Guerrero looks like an absolute beast. If he can make contact with the ball, he can do very violent things with it. Also has a potentially Ted Williams, Barry Bonds, Juan Soto-esque type of eye in terms of his ability to potentially draw walks. Switch hitting outfielder, very interesting prospect. Left fielder Omar Salazar, like the durability and potentially prodigious home run power, although the glove doesn't look particularly impressive. Omar Salazar, also known as Piccolo Pete. Another center fielder, Francisco Santos, pretty well balanced bat with, again, just potentially outstanding home run power. And admittedly, although we've had all of these guys through our first practice, scouting accuracy is not impressive at this point. So we'll get to know more about them before we have to make any big decisions. Shortstop Javi Gonzalez looks competent defensively with a pretty interesting bat for an infielder. A guy who seems like he can do everything well with his contact and his power, the highest end potential ratings for him. Another infielder, third baseman Jorge Arias. Question with him is going to be the contact and the strikeouts, but the home run power in the eye are incredible. Don't love the glove, but overall a pretty similar profile to Guerrero, but a bit less speed and a bit less ability to drive the ball into the gaps. Another infielder, Bobby Del Cid. Love the speed, and another guy who potentially great power and a great eye. And the final position player is catcher Felix Urena. Looks only average defensively, but another guy whose home run power and batting eye both look potentially exceptional. So some real interesting power hitters to think about, but it's not just about the hitters. There's some interesting pitchers as well. Starting pitching prospect right-hander Julio Loaizu. Potential 5-pitch arsenal if things go well. Think his stuff could be well above average with decent movement and above average control. Danny Baltazar, starting pitching prospect out of the Dominican. Don't love that he's 16 years old and already fragile physically, but he does have a potential 4-pitch arsenal, including outstanding curve, changeup, and cutter if he reaches his full potential. Think this stuff, the movement and the control, could all be well above average. But the pitcher we're most enthusiastic about continuing to investigate is Oscar Perez. We think his stuff, movement, and control could all be well above average. Potential for a 4-pitch arsenal with a fastball, a cutter, and a sinker. And all of those pitches could be absolutely filthy if he reaches his full potential. He is a ground baller, a ground ball pitcher who is already throwing in the mid-90s at barely closing in on 17 years old. Think he can ultimately top 100 miles with the radar gun. Solid stamina and decent at holding on runners at well. We'll certainly be getting to know more about him, but he really is a lefty throwing in the triple digits with ground ball tendencies. If he could come close to reaching his full potential, he's kind of the exact answer that we are looking for. And I also don't know what I think about the nickname, the Gimp. Wake up the Gimp. The Gimp's sleeping. Don't know if we need to revisit the Gimp from Pulp Fiction here, but don't love that nickname for Oscar Perez, but still very intrigued by his potential. And we'll also check in on a few players that we're tracking, a couple of prospects that we traded away to get some salary off of our books, as well as a couple of highly regarded players from this recent draft. Cruz Schoolcraft, potential two-way player, still kind of looks like he did when we looked at him in the draft. Potentially outstanding stuff, potentially incredible home run power. Only going to reach the low to mid-90s, we think, as far as the radar gun. He was picked 30th overall out of high school, and obviously as a high school player did not play in the minors this year for the Baltimore organization. Lucas Franco, a third baseman, another high schooler that we looked at, a decent-looking third base prospect. still looks pretty similar to the way that we thought he looked when we drafted him, although admittedly our scouting accuracy on these two guys is not that high, as we brought on our new scout after the draft and certainly haven't been particularly focused on scouting up guys who haven't played professional baseball yet. Two of the guys that we traded away, Chase Dollander, after we sent him to Chicago, he was pretty effective in a bullpen role. 3.33 ERA over 24 and a third innings pitched. 0-4 record, did have 6 saves. The shutdown to meltdown ratio of 6-5, not particularly impressive. Honestly, some of his secondary numbers, not as good as the optically strong 3.33 ERA. Does look like we now expect his stuff to be average in addition to his movement and control. Still looks like a potentially useful major league pitcher as the number 25 prospect in baseball. But given those extreme fly ball tendencies and the fact that our scout at least thinks he's a useful pitcher but not a great pitcher, we were willing to give him up. Zach Veen is a guy that we traded away to the White Sox organization as well. Once he got to them in AAA Charlotte, hit .292 with a 102 WRC plus over 233 at-bats. Still looks like a potentially interesting bat, decent looking as far as his speed, more than a competent corner outfielder. Think he could be a good, solid major league player, but we think it's unlikely, at least based on what we think in terms of his scouting report, that he's going to end up being a star unless he gets some fortuitous talent change randomness. So another guy that we didn't love moving on from, but felt that the opportunity to clear the decks a little bit with some of the not so great contracts we had on the books with veterans made sense more than hoping that Dollander or Veen ultimately turned into a star major leaguer. And with that, it is time for the 2025 World Series. The Phillies took them 7 games to oust the plucky Reds. The Yankees, in contrast, won their series in 5 games against the Tigers. So the New York Yankees back in the World Series for consecutive seasons for the first time since 1998 through 2000. And our season is over. The playoffs are over. Our season score this year is a 43. This is just a terrible score, old school. I don't know that I've ever had a 43 score in a season before. That is pretty brutal. They did actually only include our record from when we took over the Rockies, so we've got 51-68 on our books, which is better than the 58-104 that the Rockies ended up at, but certainly not expecting a very favorable evaluation from Mr. Monfort. Before we take a look at our evaluation and start seeing the final things we want to check in on before we get to the offseason, I want to congratulate your 2025 World Series champion New York Yankees. Routed the Phillies, sweeping them in the playoffs after that 2-1 deficit that the Yankees had against the Astros. After that point, they were 10-1 in the playoffs, so they went on quite a run. Fernando Cruz is your World Series most valuable player for the Yankees. If you put a ticket in FanDuel or DraftKings this spring that the Yankees were going to win the World Series and Fernando Cruz was going to be the World Series most valuable player, you probably got a little bit of cash coming your way. And we will need to do an option decision on Tyler Kinley, $5 million. I think it's very doubtful that we're going to bring a 35-year-old right-handed reliever who had a 5 ERA back for $5 million a year. Negative news, our fan loyalty has dropped to minimal. Certainly the long history of a lack of success that the Rockies have had is an influence on that. Staff member retired. Our former GM, who became the assistant GM, Bill Schmidt, retired. That's actually good because we were supposed to be paying him over $1 million for the next few years, so good to have him out of the way. Manager In-Woo Kim, who's a guy that we hired for the Albuquerque Isotopes, retires just months later. And Bryce Brent's pitching coach retires from the Rockies rookie league team. He was a guy that we brought on also, I believe, who we thought would be retiring relatively soon. We're hoping we'd get more than 1 year out of him, but it is what it is. Got a new international free agent in Edgar Fresneda, guy that we signed to a contract. Wondering if we'd like to pursue Jackson Jobe. Don't think those extreme fly ball tendencies are someone we're going to pay up a crazy amount to bring on board. Top prospect list, none of the 10 top prospects in baseball or our Colorado Rockies, not surprisingly. The offseason begins. Let's see. We've got some new goals from Charlie Monfort. Wants us to not suck completely, improve our on-base percentage, increase attendance, which certainly is going to be tough with that drop in fan loyalty, build a top 6 minor league system, bring more drafted players to the team, improve team chemistry, improve fan interest, and try to reach the playoffs in the next 5 years. So a lot of ambitious goals. What type of budget will we have to try to achieve those goals? $180 million. I think we lost money this year. Fan loyalty dropped and the team sucked. We had a difficult situation that we took over, but looking at the finances here, it's actually an increase. A $10 million increase to the budget is positive. But the fact that it's the 28th highest budget out of 30 teams and we just had fan loyalty drop to minimal means it's certainly going to be tricky next year. With the players that we have moved on from contract-wise, we do have close to $50 million available, although that does not include the money that we're going to need for international amateur free agents, and we're probably going to look to put ourselves in a situation where we're investing somewhat more than previously in scouting and player development. We'll put in a couple placeholders there. The draft budget is going to be TBD based on how we do in the lottery in a couple of months. So you can see where we can make a play on probably any free agent we want. The issue is we're probably only going to be able to add one big free agent this offseason. And even if one big free agent is Babe Ruth or Willie Mays or Ken Griffey Jr., one big free agent is not going to turn a 58-win team with awful pitching into a successful franchise. So we've still got a lot of work in front of us with this team, but we're going to start hitting it hard in the next episode and see if we can ultimately make some decisions that'll help this team start improving. A lot of arbitration eligible players, so certainly will be an opportunity for us to free up some additional money with Sam Hilliard, 31-year-old who ended the season in AAA, Sean Bouchard, Nick Gordon, Jimmy Herget, Diego Castillo, among others, who are guys in their 30s who aren't particularly impressive, who we will likely be looking to get off the books. So we will have an opportunity to open up a little bit more money. Take a very high level view. One last thing before we finish the episode to whet our appetite for what the upcoming free agent pool may look like. Taking a look at the pitchers first. Edwin Diaz, clearly the top reliever on the market. Chapman, Raisel Iglesias, Devin Williams, among others, high-level relievers on the market. Certainly would love to bring on a starting pitcher who can help us. Do like those extreme ground ball tendencies and the ground baller pitcher type that Ranger Suarez brings, but he's selfish, looking for $27 million a year. Some negative personality traits. I don't really think, looking at his profile, that spending $27 million a year on a guy like him makes sense. Dylan Cease, torn elbow ligament. Zach Eflin, strained forearm. And then even Jack Flaherty and Michael King looking for pretty significant money. So I don't know that we're going to be able to solve our starting pitching issues with the guys who are on the market this year. And even more importantly than that, just the lack of money that we have available. It's going to be a multi-year process to hopefully turn this thing around. Top free agents, Pete Alonso, Kyle Schwarber, Kyle Tucker, Alex Bregman, and Marcell Ozuna among them. Alonso, Schwarber, and Tucker all looking for over $40 million. Ozuna looking for close to $40 million. Bregman looking for $35 million. These are some very big numbers. Just don't think we can realistically play at the top end of the market. And who knows if all of these guys are actually going to hit free agency. But we'll see how the next few weeks go in our next episode as we work through awards season, start making some arbitration decisions, perhaps look at the trade market. We've got some coaching vacancies to fill, as we talked about. And we've got a lot of work to do to ensure that we are not a 100-loss team again next season. So looking forward to finally getting this first offseason with the Colorado Rockies underway. As I noted, we've got enough money to sign some free agents. I just don't know. Well, I do know we're obviously not one or two free agents away from being a competitive team. So it might be a situation where we try to make some moves on the margin, maybe bring in a couple of bargain free agents, maybe even ultimately boost scouting and player development a bit to hopefully start building up this organization. It doesn't seem like there's a quick fix here, looking at the money that we have to spend, the relatively meager budget we have, the fact that it's going to be a struggle to get the attendance that we need to deliver big profitability given that hit that we just took to fan loyalty. So it's gonna be a multi-year process here. I think if we can keep our job, we'll ultimately get there. The question is going to ultimately be how much patience Mr. Monfort has with us for this upcoming season, not sucking completely, and improving our on-base percentage are the key goals that he's going to be focused on. So we'll see if we can do better in 2026 with a full off season and a full year in charge than we did in the 2/3 of a season that we were in charge here in 2025. Until our next episode, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.